Welcome to the launch of the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. My name is Kevin O'Sullivan. I'm Environment and Science Editor with the Irish Times, and I'm your host for this morning's event. I think this is a very important day for Ireland's response to the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the water crisis that are all interlinked and affect the island of Ireland with no recognition of a border. I think it's quite appropriate that I'm joining you today from COP26 in Glasgow, the UN summit, which will determine the global response to the climate crisis for the next decade. Over the next hour, we will feature the main element of this important initiative, and very clear this has the potential to help generate science-informed solutions to all those crises which I have referred to. We are delighted that Taoiseach Micheál Martin and Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill will address us and give a strong endorsement of the endeavour. Later, we will have a panel discussion between leading scientists based on the island of Ireland who have helped develop the framework for this network. But firstly, I would like to ask Professor Yvonne Buckley, who's Professor of Zoology at Trinity College Dublin and co-chair of the AICBRN, to outline how it is structured and how it will operate.
Good morning, a really warm welcome to everybody, and it's great to see people joining from all over the island today. This event has been nearly 2 years in the making, and it's involved the close collaboration of many researchers across disciplines and institutions in both jurisdictions of the island. The climate and biodiversity crises are connected. Sorry, something's gone wrong with my slides there. I'm just going to try sharing my screen again. There we go. The climate and biodiversity crises are connected. Climate change contributes to biodiversity loss, while biodiversity helps to regulate the climate, and more diverse ecosystems can resist and recover from shocks more easily. Finding solutions to the climate and biodiversity emergency across all sectors of society is a really complicated challenge, and it requires a diverse and yet integrated range of solutions. We recognized that piecemeal research in different disciplinary silos would not provide the integrated solutions at the scale and speed that we need to avert substantial shocks to our ecosystems, economies, and well-being.
Sorry, Yvonne, just to jump in, could you try the screen share again? We're just seeing your notes on the PowerPoint. It's not full.
No worries.
Full screen.
Okay, I'll try that again. Thanks, Fergus. Sorry. Right, here we go. Is that okay?
Yeah. Now we can see the white slide with the climate and biodiversity crisis are connected.
Excellent. Thank you. We came together in 2019 to develop a vision for how integrated research can help to provide the pressing solutions we need to close the huge gap between what we need to do to combat the climate and biodiversity crisis and where we currently are. And the scale of the challenge certainly requires innovative solutions. The diversity of disciplines and expertise of members of the network across the physical, natural, and social sciences, across engineering and humanities, enables us to cooperatively undertake the essential research required. We've already built strong collaborative relationships, we've engaged widely with research and funding communities, and we've developed new research ideas together. And by working together, we'll optimize existing research investments, identify critically needed infrastructure, and develop teams capable of both addressing the challenges and becoming more successful in securing additional research funding. Many of the building blocks required to understand the science of climate and biodiversity and to mitigate and adapt to climate and biodiversity change already exist in Ireland across academia, the public sector, and industry. And with the launch of the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network, we now have the glue to bring these elements together. A more joined up collaborative approach will lead to longer term, more sustainable solutions with research funds used much more effectively. There is considerable strength across multiple institutions on the island. We have the critical mass needed to use cutting-edge research to develop integrated technological, engineering, nature-based and societal solutions to the biodiversity and climate crises and ensure they're applied as part of a just transition. And we will continue to grow the network over the next year. A wide range of global, EU and national policies and action plans require rapid progress towards climate neutrality, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and the halting of ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss. A massive research and innovation effort is required to meet the ambitions of the governments and to ensure the solutions are strongly evidence-based and provide cost-effective benefits. This climate and biodiversity research initiative will require substantial and sustained new funding support to deliver innovative science and solutions at scale arising from interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and interinstitutional collaboration. New funding could support a range of different programs, including postgraduate training, postdoctoral fellowships, shared academic appointments, new infrastructure, and research grants. We call on research funding agencies to provide a portfolio of research instruments that are aligned with other agencies, that address research needs and build capacity in the research sector. A minimum of 10 to 20 million euros of new research expenditure per year is needed for at least 10 years to adequately address the current challenges. And this funding will increase capacity within Ireland to be competitive for large-scale EU funds. It'll train new researchers and attract and retain the talent that we need for the carbon neutral green economy that we are committed to achieving by 2050. This is just 30 years away. This will be the most rapid economic transition we have ever seen, and business as usual is just not an option. We have already seen the benefits of working together and believe that there is much more that the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network can achieve. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Yvonne, for that quick run through the key elements. And I think it's very clear that it's a very impressive new departure. And I love that emphasis on integrated solutions. And I think it's quite striking when you look at the emissions profile that you have shown there between north and south, that it's exactly the same in terms of what's required now. And I think that's a great word you've used there in terms of the glue that will bring this new interdisciplinary network onto a new level and will be informed by evidence-based science. So I think that's a great overview of what's on the table already. So at this point, I would like to present the video presentations from both our Taoiseach and the Deputy First Minister.
I'm delighted to speak to you today and congratulate you on the launch of the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. Never in our history has the need to address the escalating climate and biodiversity crisis been so urgent. Our response must be framed by robust science and cross-border cooperation, and your network has great potential to play a constructive role in this effort. As we all know, the climate and biodiversity emergency transcends borders and impacts all parts of our society, urban, rural and coastal, north and south of the border. Addressing the emergency requires diverse collaboration across our island to develop the integrated solutions that are so urgently needed. This will require joint efforts of people from multiple disciplines and innovation from all sectors, public, private and civil society. We are stronger working on this together, and failure is simply not an option. The climate crisis has never been more tangible. In the past year alone, the world has been scarred by devastating floods, raging wildfires and record-breaking heat waves. International science has also never been clearer on the human-induced causes of climate change. The latest IPCC report reaffirmed this and the need for urgent action. Our biodiversity crisis equally is accelerating. Human actions threaten more species now than ever before. Around 1 million species already face extinction, many within decades, unless action is taken to tackle the key drivers of biodiversity loss. As the landmark 2019 Global Assessment on Biodiversity Loss stated, nature is essential for human existence and good quality of life. Most of nature's contributions to people are not fully replaceable, and some are irreplaceable. We must follow the science, as we have done throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and turn things around for the good of all people and our planet. Ireland is a small country, but we have a big role to play in fighting climate change and biodiversity degradation. Internationally, we must live up to our obligations under the Paris Agreement, as well as the Convention on Biological Diversity. We are committed to working with international partners to achieve real transformative change, as evidenced just this week in our participation in and commitment to the current COP26 climate negotiations. The recently adopted Kunming Declaration from Phase 1 of the UN Biodiversity Conference will also be key. It will be further cemented in Phase 2 of the COP15 next year and put us on a pathway for the full realisation of the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Recognising the links between biodiversity and climate change, ecosystem conservation and management can contribute to climate mitigation, for example, by increasing carbon storage through the restoration of degraded peatlands. Indeed, we have invested significantly in such restoration efforts, and far more is planned in the coming years to manage our peatlands and peat soils as carbon reservoirs. However, we also know that climate change is a growing driver of biodiversity loss. Already, degraded habitats are less resilient to the impacts of climate change, and they are vulnerable to further damage from the impacts of a warming planet. This renders them less able to provide the ecosystem services that we need, such as carbon storage and water regulation. Reversing climate change and biodiversity loss are thus among the greatest challenges of our times, and I am confident that, working together, the island of Ireland is ready to play its part. On becoming Taoiseach, I established a new Shared Island unit in my department, and 1 year ago I launched the Shared Island Initiative. This spans all of government and is focused on bringing us together across communities and traditions by working on common concerns for our shared future, underpinned by the Good Friday Agreement. Tackling climate change, addressing the biodiversity crisis, and conserving our common environment is a major focus. The generational challenges we face on climate and biodiversity demand concerted action by governments and across society on this island. We need to focus our relationships, north, south, and east-west, so that we act with greatest collective impact. We need to coordinate our policy interventions and financial resources and work with common strategic purpose. The Shared Island Initiative is proceeding on this basis, with substantial investment and cooperation commitments. Our approach involves listening to civil society across the island and bringing forward research to provide a strong evidence base. In February, the Minister for the Environment convened a Shared Island Dialogue event on climate and environment, with participation by over 140 civil society groups, sector representatives, researchers and environmental agencies from north and south, including Professor Ogallacore of the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. And in October, the National Economic and Social Council, as part of its research on Shared Island issues, published a report on opportunities for collaboration on climate and biodiversity. Both exercises highlighted the value of all-island civic society engagement and networks in tackling these strategic challenges we face, and your network is an important locus for such work. Timing and investment in this important area is everything, and there have been several important developments by government in recent months that I would like to recap with you. In July, I launched a major new North-South research programme with a €40 million commitment over 5 years. This will support greater collaborative research on key concerns for our shared future, not least on climate and biodiversity. I am pleased to report that the Higher Education Authority has seen a huge level of interest in the first call for applications under the programme. I look forward to seeing significant all-island research and collaborations on environmental matters progressing with its support. Further, as part of the revised National Development Plan published on the 4th of October, the Government set out a series of new shared island investment priorities with the linked goals of realising a more sustainable, connected and prosperous island. On climate change, we have set investment priorities to deliver the North-South interconnector, which will enhance the single electricity market and facilitate the integration of renewable electricity into the power system, support cross-border climate action partnerships, invest in the rollout of electric vehicle charging across the island, and explore cross-border approaches on renewable energy. More broadly, we've also affirmed objectives to support more all-island biodiversity initiatives, conserve border region peatlands as valuable biodiversity ecosystems and carbon sinks, invest for an all-island circular economy, create an island-wide greenway network, and enhance rail connectivity, following on from the all-island strategic rail review which is underway. The Government has put in place the necessary resourcing to meet these priority objectives with our partners. Through the Shared Island Fund, we have committed at least €1 billion in funding out to 2030, ring-fenced for North-South investment. We are working now with the Northern Ireland Executive, the United Kingdom Government, and with local authority and other partners on the deployment of this funding to coordinate and optimise approaches that will benefit the island of Ireland as a whole. We will continue to work with dedication and determination to achieve a sustainable shared future for our island. Using a scientific base to co-develop climate and biodiversity solutions with citizens, communities and industry, as your network aims to achieve, will be hugely important to test such solutions in the real world and ensure that they are sustainable. Building climate and biodiversity literacy in this way is key to developing public buy-in and ensuring success in achieving our overarching ambitions. As a researcher-led initiative, I recognise the diverse makeup of the All-Island Climate and Biodiversity Research Network, comprising leading researchers, scientists and engineers from multiple disciplines. I know that you recognise the urgency of both mitigation and adaptation actions and the need for a just transition that shares costs and benefits fairly. Leveraging the Shared Islands research and development capacity will bring benefits to all of society, not just environmentally, but socially and economically also. Our research and policy communities must work closer together to align expectations, needs, and critical success factors. I welcome the openness of the network to work with government, business, and civil society in that regard. Research is urgently needed to develop integrated solutions that can be deployed in a fair and just manner. Solutions that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, solutions that will increase carbon storage, and solutions that will protect and restore biodiversity and ecosystem services. I welcome an increased focus and attention to nature-based solutions that work to jointly address these problems. And let us not forget what is at stake here. A livable planet is critical for healthy populations, reduced conflict, economic activity, food and energy security, job creation and livelihoods. However, the natural world is complex. Ireland has over 30,000 species. We need to understand how these species and their interactions will respond to a changing climate. We also need to ensure that our restoration efforts follow best practice and explore the opportunities for solutions that also assist with our net zero climate targets. We rely on the academic community to focus their research efforts to address these societal challenges. When we are more informed, we can collectively develop stronger, more effective policies to protect our natural world, our home. In conclusion, I want to again commend you on the launch of your network today and to thank Professors Brina Ogallacore and Mark Emerson for the opportunity to address you. As the old saying goes, two heads are better than one. On that basis, the expansive reach of the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network, to include a multitude of professionals, research teams, universities, industry partners and community engagement, is very promising. Your focus on solutions-based research has never been more critical or necessary. I have confidence in the important work that you will undertake and its relevance to policy and practice across this island. In that respect, I am delighted to announce that my government, through the Minister for Heritage, Malcolm Noonan, is in a position to provide initial financial support to facilitate the development of the network and further strengthen your collaborative efforts. I wish you every success with your endeavours and look forward to engaging with your crucial outputs and outcomes in the time ahead. Well done. Gurv Mina Mina Mahagwiv Galer.
Hello everyone, I'm really delighted to be part of the launch of this All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. I'm grateful for the opportunity to engage on what I believe is one of the most significant challenges facing us as an island and indeed as a global society. Climate change and its impact on our biodiversity is devastating. The effects that can be seen and felt all around us and across the world. The climate emergency is inflicting deep harm on many different levels, and there is no doubt that we're facing into a biodiversity crisis. A worsening of the situation would be catastrophic for the future of this island, but we have an opportunity to do something about it. I'm returning fresh from the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, where leaders from across the world came together to set out how, together, we can tackle climate change. The scale of the challenge is such that a truly international global response is required. But that will only be effective with an inclusive local response in every part of the world. For us in government, that means taking the action needed at policy level to implement the measures that will help to achieve our shared goals. Living and working sustainably and protecting our environment must be at the heart of our decision making and our delivery. Our executive recently launched its draft Green Growth Strategy, which seeks to adopt that holistic approach to tackling the climate crisis in the right way and to the benefit of all of our people. It means improving people's quality of life, creating green jobs in a clean, resilient environment. It's a multi-decade strategy which sets out the long-term vision and a solid framework for tackling the climate crisis in the right way and helping us to meet ambitious net zero targets. The Executive will also bring forward a new energy strategy that aims to ensure that our energy is secure, affordable and clean for us now and for future generations. And our Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has established a science transformation programme to help support a healthy and sustainable environment, a rural community and economy. We are committed to playing our part, but as we know, this is going to take all of us. The situation calls for real partnership, collaboration, co-design and co-delivery. And I'm really encouraged by the leadership that's being shown in bringing together this all-island network. There is much to be gained from working together across the island, and indeed across these islands and with others on environmental and agricultural policies and programmes. This island has experienced significant and sustained biodiversity loss since the 1970s. We know there's been insufficient progress to improve the conservation status of our priority habitats and species. As part of the Atlantic biogeographic region, with specialist habitats and species associated with our climate, there is a clear need for us to cooperate and collaborate to address biodiversity loss and to restore natural ecosystems. Continued joined-up working through our environment agencies and the North-South Ministerial Council is crucial, and there has been some great work delivered across this island through the Interreg projects, ensuring information and best practice, demonstrating clear benefits for biodiversity and nature-based solutions to climate change on the island. There can be no doubt that we will be most effective in tackling this monumental challenge by working together. So I want to congratulate everyone involved in this network for your efforts to bring people and organisations together to co-develop biodiversity solutions that will help to effect positive change. I wish you all every success, and thank you.
We seem to have lost Kevin. Kevin, are you there?
Yeah. Sorry, no, that's great. Yeah, I'm back with you now. So I think that was a great endorsement to kick off proceedings from both Taoiseach and from the Deputy First Minister. And I think it's indicative of the change mindset that has taken root in Ireland in recent times, which is really good, in the sense that politicians are showing new levels of understanding of the climate and biodiversity crisis and talking about nature-based solutions and sustainability and inclusion more, which is a good indicator we're moving to a different place, and we all know that's so important. And I think both have underlined the need for public buy-in and greater understanding, and I think the broad base of the new network is going to be very helpful in that regard. So I'm going to just have a quick introduction for all the panelists, and as you know, Yvonne is going to join us as well, but I think it's important to highlight that she is Vice President for Biodiversity and Climate Action at Trinity College, which was a recent appointment, which is very interesting new role, and she's co-director of Nature Plus at Trinity Centre for Biodiversity and Sustainable Nature-Based Solutions. And you've heard mention of Brian. Brian Ogallacore is director of the SFI Marai Research Centre and professor of energy and engineering at UCC. He is chair of the International Energy Agency Technology Collaboration Programme on energy systems and modelling, and it's fair to say Marai has done some really important modelling and analysis of energy trends, not just in Ireland but internationally, and especially within the EU, that has helped inform future directions. Then we have Professor Jennifer McKinley, who's professor in physical geography and director of the Centre for GIS and Geomatics in the School of Natural and Built Environment in Queen's University, Belfast. And she has a number of international leadership roles, which also include the Executive Council. She's an Executive Council member of the International Union of Geological Sciences. Then we have Derek Jackson, who's an internationally renowned coastal geographer and professor of coastal geomorphology at Ulster University. Most of you will also has been a notable climate scientist based at Icarus in Maynooth University, but also as a key lead author in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and notably their Working Group 1 report, which came out last August on on the latest physical impacts of climate change. And then our final panelist is Professor Anna Davis, who's Professor of Geography, Environment and Society at Trinity College. And she's also a member of Ireland's inaugural National Climate Change Advisory Council, which has an expanded role under new legislation, and notably the Climate Action Act, which was introduced this year. So Brian, if I could go to you first, and maybe I know your previous involvement in North-South networking. So can you explain how this network will build on that? And does it involve much more than just formalizing links?
Thank you, Kevin. I suppose the key thing, and this came across in Yvonne's presentation, is the scale of what we need to do in a short time. So the key difference in what we're doing today is effectively marking that point at which the research community publicly expresses its ambition and intent to scale up to help deliver the solutions. We do have, as you say, and have had individual sort of collaborations across different groups within the network, but this coming together is really about scaling up. We've identified our intent, and also we've quantified what kind of broad brush funding is required, you know, a minimum of 10 million per year, additional funding on the research side to help translate the climate ambition there is political agreement on, to translate that ambition into action, to ensure that we can meet the targets that we've set ourselves. Because we have failed to meet EU targets, to meet our national ambitions. Now our ambition has grown. So the coming together of the different disciplines and scaling up is really to I suppose, support the governments and society to meet those ambitions.
And, you know, does joint ambition mean a greater chance of success on an all-island basis, do you think?
It definitely does. And it's not just because on a north-south basis that we have shared challenges in terms of our emissions profile, and the fact that a lot of the emissions don't see any borders, but also we've got a scaling up in terms of the interdisciplinary approach we're taking. A lot of funding in the climate and biodiversity space has been in the science and technology arena. That's critically important, but also to bring in the social sciences, arts and humanities is an absolute necessity, because this is a societal shift. It's not about just technology solutions. It's about a widespread shift across business, across how we do things, and across society to achieve the goals that we're setting out to do.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Could I bring in Jenny? And you know, Brian is talking there about joining forces, but can you explain to the audience how that might translate in your area, in the geosciences? What will it mean? Will it help bring effort to a better level, a more thorough sort of evaluation of those impacts? And you know, what's your initial response to the approach?
Thank you, Kevin. I mean, I think my I suppose initial response is that, you know, we have been working with colleagues north and south, and you mentioned the geosciences. So, you know, geoscientists have been working north and south extensively over, you know, a long period of time. But we realize that it's not just working in our discipline silos. And this network allows us not just to make contact with the different disciplines, either north or south, but actually to broaden that network so that we're actually right across, you know, the geographic island. And in doing things like nature-based solutions, having those as integrated part of the solutions needs to bring together that discipline. And the network allows that. So it might allow a case study that's been running very successfully in Dingle Peninsula to be able to be developed and looked at for the foil, you know, for loch foil in the community and catchments there. But it is, in doing that, you need a complete broad scope of disciplines and experts working with the communities and working with each other to find, well, how would you approach this? And what can different disciplines and outlooks and perspectives on this bring to the table? And I think something like a nature-based, working in harmony with nature brings not just the ecologists, but also needs people that understand the land, understand the environment, understand the streams, the water, all of that is connected. So we need a systems approach. And I think that's why this network will allow us to do that.
Well, that system approach is what you've illustrated very well there, I have to say. And just related to that, could I ask Jarek, the marine overlap is obvious, and given what Jenny has said, we have the same species, north and south, same vulnerability to sea level rise. So how do you foresee cooperation on this key front developing?
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I think Jenny has really hit the nail on the head here by emphasizing the interdisciplinary research. We're dealing with an environment which is complex. The marine environment in particular has for a long time been almost a forgotten landscape because it's out of sight, out of mind almost. But as soon as resources are being threatened and we get depletion in fishing stocks, for example, we have to investigate why that has happened. And I think pulling together resources and technical resources and scientific resources, we can really tackle a very complex environment such as the marine environment. So working together is absolutely key for this. And in fact, a project I'm working on, MARPAM at the moment, which is an Interreg funded project, really emphasizes the complex nature of a marine site, for example, in County Down. And we have to understand the environment, and science has to guide that management of that environment. So working together and interdisciplinary research is absolutely key.
Obvious follow on to that then is the whole issue of marine protected areas. I know the government in the Republic has committed to 30% of marine protected areas by 2030, which is a huge transition in our marine area. And maybe you outline what's envisaged in the north, but does this network complement that kind of initiative?
Absolutely. Going off on our own little tangents, it's really not feasible to aspire to that level of marine protected area designation. So we must collaborate together integratedly to achieve those targets.
Very good. So just broadening the discussion a little, if I could ask Peter, to what extent has IPCC reports informed choice of research themes and priorities that are going to be embraced by this network?
So that the process of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change really is an eye-opener as an author to how you have to work together across institutions and across fundamental disciplines to come up with the solutions, the holistic picture, to recognize the win-wins, the win-losses, to actually come up with sensible, informed, policy-relevant information. You cannot do this as an individual institution. You cannot do this as an individual discipline. We have to work together. We have to be enabled to work together on a sustained basis to understand the multiple issues at play and to recognize how you trade those off to come up with the optimal solutions. So the IPCC is an object lesson in why we need to do this, why the solution is by coming together and working together on a sustained basis.
Very interesting, and I think it sort of signals a new departure as well. But I was just wondering to what extent, I think everyone would agree that we're sort of moving away from the era of climate denialism, which preoccupied science a lot of the time and having to explain and reinforce the message. And I think there's greater focus even within the IPCC on solutions. Can you explain how that's going to translate next year with follow-on reports from Working Group 1?
So the Working Group 1 was the first of 3 working group reports that will come out. Working Group 2 in February next year will look at impacts and adaptation, and Working Group 3 in March will look at mitigation options. And then the whole series will be wrapped together in the synthesis report, which when I'm not on webinars at the moment is my life's work, is trying to work on the synthesis report text that brings together those perspectives. And it's really, that's where I really see the object lesson into why we need sustained research across multiple disciplines across the island of Ireland to recognise and respond to the challenges before us.
Very good. Could I ask Anna? It seems to me, and I think it's sort of, you can read it in between the lines in terms of the outline framework that's going to be published today by the new network. But are there very significant data deficits in terms of informing solutions? And I'm asking you that question in light of your role with the Climate Change Advisory Council, because you have to advise on carbon budgets and you have to review progress on decarbonisation tied into 5-year carbon budgets over coming years. So do you feel that you have to fill those gaps pretty quickly and that this network might have a role in that?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, just to clarify, I was part of the first Climate Change Advisory Council, so I'm not in the current council, which is developing the carbon budgets, but absolutely. Data deficits are a major barrier to our understanding, not just of processes, but how people react to interventions in our systems. So I think that from that perspective, it's an incredibly difficult challenge that the current council is facing. And I wish them all the best in the very tricky initiative that they're embarking on currently. But I think what was important is, and you mentioned it then in your last question there to Peter, that we have moved significantly along the pathway away from having to defend or explain yet again about the processes behind climate change and biodiversity loss to the position where it is now widely agreed. Even the Irish Times itself just over a week ago saw that the majority of people in Ireland are convinced that human-induced climate change is happening and levels of concern have never been higher. But at the same time, polls also indicate opposition to the kinds of changes, carbon taxes, electric vehicles, reduction in meat eating, that are being mooted to address these climate changes. So I think those kinds of tensions are really at the core of the kind of research that the All Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network can really approach, seeking to enact a just transition. Because climate change, as you rightly said, is not just an environmental issue, it has massive social and economic implications for people. It will cause huge employment changes and job losses in the fossil fuel industry, and many other jobs will need to radically transform. It will also bring new opportunities, and these will need to be permanent, decently paid jobs with good conditions. So it's absolutely urgent that effective climate action must be combined to anticipate and manage these changes so that no community is left behind. And higher education institutes, their leaders, the faculty, the students, have a very specific role and responsibility to help in this societal transformation.
I think that's really interesting that you sort of underline that this has to be underpinned by a just transition, because I think there's new recognition now that without that, all these actions are going to fail, and you know, the transformation of both the economy and society won't happen. But in relation to that, Anna, to what extent do you think new thinking is required? Like, as far as I understand it, the circular economy is a very nebulous thing, and for most people, and yet it's going to have a huge impact on how we live over coming decades.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a just transition is a set of principles and processes which are seeking to shift from a carbon economy to a green society in a fair way. And a circular economy is part and parcel of that, because it means we're addressing fundamental production and consumption cycles and ensuring that we move beyond the linear take, make, dispose model to something which is more regenerative, which is more restorative, and within which we can also repair relationships with nature, with non-human societies, with other sort of sections of society where there are massive inequalities. So it's an opportunity really with the circular economy to do things differently. Now, it's incredibly complex. We've talked already about wicked systems, which is climate change, biodiversity loss, but also our social systems are incredibly complex. It's very difficult to know what an intervention what difference an intervention will make in such a complex system, which is why we all need to work together. As Michael Martin said in his presentation, we are better together. And it's not just aggregating individual sets of knowledge, it's about creating a sum which is the sum of its whole parts, a kind of gestalt value, if you like, where we see things more clearly because we're having these conversations which are happening in isolated silos.
Well, just finally on top of that, and a lot of our audience this morning are remarking on it, you know, the importance of real public engagement and community involvement. And I don't think we're there yet, are we, on that, in terms of really tuning into all that, to all the concerns, to, you know, reassuring them that it can be done.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the Climate Assembly was a landmark event and really did pushed the climate policy environment, and it's been lauded internationally as a case of good practice, but we really need to build on it. You know, public participation is not a once-off event, it's a process. And we need to embed these processes in the policymaking process, right from the beginning to its implementation phase. So the Climate Assembly suggests that if you provide people with scientific insights, allow people to discuss and frame the questions to be asked and the recommendations to be made, you get a far more progressive picture of people's willingness to act differently to address climate change and biodiversity loss. So I think we really need to open up rather than close down debates, and it needs to be embedded in our policy process, not as a nice to have add-on that happens once a year and is forgotten, but it's absolutely embedded. And this way we will bring people with us in this difficult road ahead.
Very good. If I could come back to Yvonne, can you outline to the audience this morning how you selected priority themes for research to be conducted by the network?
Yeah, so we held some research workshops with members of the network, and we chatted about what our research skills and expertise were in. We talked about the big climate and biodiversity targets that are out there, and we talked about the kinds of systems that we have on the island of Ireland that would enable us to do something really significant. And that enabled us to identify a few different themes. One was on restoring peatlands for people, nature and carbon. Another one was on climate resilient cities. So thinking about the adaptations that our cities are going to have to make, as well as some of the mitigation options that we're going to have to enact within our cities. And we talked a lot about transformative change, this idea of a just transition, and working with communities to try and enable that kind of transformative change to happen. So they came about actually quite naturally, but they were, you know, we have these, we call them flagship projects. We've identified, you know, a few flagship projects that are really, you know, key to working on things like coastal management, restoration of peatlands, transformative change. But what we're really trying, and those are different domains, and there are plenty of other domains that we can work in. But what we're also really trying to do is build the capacity of the researchers on the island to work together. So it can be quite difficult to work across disciplines, and we need to develop methods and ways of doing that, and also to work not just between academic disciplines, but to actively engage with policymakers, with communities, to co-design solutions, as Anna really nicely pointed out. So there's a whole body of work there in building our capacity and building the capacity of younger or early career researchers to do that kind of transdisciplinary work, which goes beyond a single discipline.
If I could recommend that people read that list of challenges, which is really impressive. I think it's a great distillation of the issues that are facing the island. So I congratulate you on that. But let's get down to the bread and butter. What status has the financing of this research? I see the Taoiseach has provisionally agreed initial funding, but can you outline what's planned now in terms of scaling up the funding? I think Brian has referred to 10 million a year, so we're probably talking about 100 million, which is not insignificant by the end of the decade.
Yeah, so at the moment, we have funding kindly through Minister Malcolm Noonan's office for a secretariat for All Island Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. And that will provide us with a full-time person for 3 years to enable us to do the kinds of activities that we've been doing on a voluntary basis up till now. And I just want to acknowledge the support of Maynooth University in providing us with a secretariat up until now, and Elaine McCarthy has been acting in that role. So we'll be able to actually engage, one of the things that we've lacked is the capacity to engage more with additional members of the network, to engage more with the research agencies around the island, to try and pull everybody's voice into the network. And we're really hoping that now with a full-time secretariat, we'll be able to do that. So that gives us the foundation to go on. But then the piece that's missing is the research funding at scale. Just finished a funding application for the Higher Education Authority North-South Research Programme, which if successful would provide us with €4 million, but that will obviously go out for review and be assessed. So that funding is not assured. So we're really in the phase now of trying to convince research funding agencies that this is a really important initiative and needs significant funding, new funding that doesn't take away from the excellent work that's already going on.
Very good. So we don't have too much time left, but so I'm just going to open up discussion, a few quick fire questions, and whoever would like to come in, it'd be very helpful. Firstly, I could ask a tricky question. How do you enhance North-South cooperation, especially on climate action and research, when clearly Brexit doesn't help matters and there are indications that the UK might pull out of major EU research programs such as Horizon, Copernicus and Euratom? Does anyone want to volunteer to give a view on that?
Sure, I can try and take that. I mean, this is one area where we absolutely need to work together irrespective of any political differences. And this can be a flagship of how we can work together in a post-Brexit world for the common good across North-South. So if we can't do it here, we will not be able to do it anywhere, and I have faith that we can.
Very good. Well, that's a good positive answer. Thank you for that, Peter. Just on policy then, and both from a north and a south point of view, are there any major deficits that really impair progress in terms of scientific research, and what's required to get us some early momentum on this initiative? Brian.
Well, I think we've already pointed to the funding deficit, which in part the shared island contribution to this HEA call is a first step, an important first step. I think in addition, we've only recently had this political change north and south in terms of very significant increase in ambition, and translating that ambition into action is still, I think, poorly understood. And this is where research can help, but it also requires good engagement between the research community and the policy community, I think.
Very good. Well, I'm afraid we've come towards the end of our gathering this morning. So thank you, panelists, for all of that. Very interesting discussion and for your input. I would now like to ask Professor Mark Emerson of Queen's University, Belfast, who is co-chair of AICBRN, to make some closing remarks.
Many thanks. Thanks to the panelists and to Kevin for moderating this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Emerson. I'm a professor of biodiversity at Queen's University, Belfast, and I'm one of the current 4 co-chairs of the All Island Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. So you've heard from our panelists about our ambitions and what we want to, I'm distracted by Kevin there, and what we want to try and do to achieve through the network. On behalf of the network members, I would like to sincerely thank both Taoiseach Micheál Martin and the Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill for their strong support of the network and what we've been trying to achieve and deliver to address the climate and biodiversity crises. Clearly, there are many initiatives underway in government, north and south, to address these issues, but hopefully you can see that there is a desperate need for a network that helps to coordinate research activity and identify the gaps in our knowledge base to help deliver against government targets, nationally, internationally, and on an all-island basis. And at the same time, I think the network provides a much needed platform that brings together researchers, business, government, and civic society to address the climate and biodiversity crises. I think the network members to date have recognized this, and it's what motivated them to give up their time to help drive the network forward. And I want to be clear that to date, we haven't received funding. The network has been driven by its members, contributing their time, their energy, and their efforts. And this is why the Taoiseach's announcement of funding supports today is so important, and it's very welcome. Now, the funding announcement today means that we can step up a gear and begin to interact more widely with the research community on an all-island basis. This will enable a step change in our activity to match the sense of urgency that we have and the need to act to deliver against the 2050 net zero targets. We can only do this by working together across disciplinary boundaries, mixing the social and natural sciences with engineering and economics. For me, working in the network, one of the strongest signals that we're on the right track is that across disciplines, we very quickly reached a consensus about what needs to be done and the framework within which it needs to be delivered. And we arrived at a consensus focused on delivering solutions to the climate and biodiversity crises. I think this is one of the relatively unique aspects of the All-Island Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. It is that we bring together colleagues from across a diversity of disciplines to develop an integrated mix of solutions. We have social solutions co-designed with civic society to both provide the evidence base for the formation of policy, but also to avoid perverse outcomes or incentives. We've got nature-based solutions that aim to restore and work with nature to help mitigate against climate impacts. Re-wetting peat bogs and coastal realignment schemes that develop salt marshes as carbon sinks are prime examples. But nature-based solutions are not a panacea. They're part of a toolbox of approaches that need to be used in conjunction with engineering or technology-based solutions. Engineering solutions reflect the built and physical environment. It's where architecture, city design, flood alleviation, and smart transport networks sit. Technology-based solutions take design to another level and look at the deployment of technologies at scale or embedded in industry. And good examples there include anaerobic digesters on farms, smart buses, and renewables in general. Nature-based solutions have been a recent vogue, but nature-based solutions alone will not be enough to mitigate against climate change. We need to use a spectrum of solutions, some of which are designed to reduce emissions, others that are designed to enable a more sustainable way of living. Ultimately, the network aims to provide a framework where we can work with business, leveraging our R&D expertise, government, providing the evidence base for the formation of policy, and society to co-design outcomes that benefit all. In conclusion then, the network provides a way for us to work together across jurisdictional boundaries, raising the bar for everyone and coordinating our research in a way that reflects the scale at which biodiversity and climate both change. We are stronger working together rather than apart. The All-Island Climate and Biodiversity Research Network started pretty much as a discussion over coffee at an SFI summit in Athlone in 2019. And since our inaugural meeting in December 2019, the network has grown to include 8 higher education institutions and 18 schools, centres and institutes distributed across those universities on the island of Ireland. Today's launch sees the start of a sustained effort across all institutions and disciplines to step up and to help ensure that we work with government, industry and society, north and south, on the island of Ireland to address the climate and biodiversity challenges that we face. This weekend, I joined the climate protesters marching here in Belfast, and I was struck by the passion and honesty of those protesting against what is perceived as a lack of action to address climate and biodiversity changes. There is a sense of urgency among civil society, a sense that we need to address the climate and biodiversity crises with practical solutions, solutions that are based on evidence and hard science that cuts across disciplines to find shared solutions that will address the climate and biodiversity challenges ahead. This is a challenge over which we cannot afford to fail. The All-Island Climate and Biodiversity Research Network reflects the passion and ambition of researchers from across the island of Ireland to provide solutions that will secure the futures of our children and our children's children. I'd finally like to just acknowledge the administrative supports that we have received from Maynooth University, and in particular from Elaine McCarthy, who has provided the administrative and management support throughout the development of the network. So, on behalf of network members, thank you for joining us today to listen and reflect on what we aim to do, and we look forward to engaging with you all in the very near future. Thank you again very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark, for that. And I think it's a great start to the network. And I would like now to just finally thank the audience for joining us today. Goodbye.